There is a silence deeper than mere quiet. It does not arrive when the noise fades, but when the need for noise dissolves. That silence, heavy, unadorned, is the prelude to truth. You are not who you think you are. You are what is left when the thinking ends. The rest is dream work, the biographies we fabricate, the accomplishments we parade, the pain we decorate in language and memory. It all sways on the same fragile branch, a story told to no one, about someone who never really existed. The will, that cursed engine, does not rest. It lurches forward, famished, forever convinced that the next thing will suffice. A better body, a fuller love, a cleaner past, a future finally obedient. But the will is a furnace that feeds on lack. It cannot be sated, only quieted by exhaustion or death. Look closely. Every desire you obey leads you not to peace, but to further wanting. The promotion only breeds the hunger for status. The kiss only stirs the dread of loss. The house becomes a prison the moment it is owned. Pleasure is rented, and always the rent increases. You were not born to be happy. You were born, and that is burden enough. Modernity lies with a straight face. It promises you wellness, fulfillment, actualization, but what it sells is noise, a constant flood of tasks, products, images, identities. The world no longer asks who you are. It demands that you perform what it wants to see. Even your rebellion has been commodified. Even your sadness has been branded. You are encouraged to express yourself, but only in pre-approved forms. The culture does not care whether you are free. It only needs you to keep moving, because stillness is a threat. Stillness breeds thought. And thought, if left undiluted by entertainment or ideology, will show you the truth, that much of life is machinery built to distract you from its own emptiness. Watch people, observe them in trains, in offices, in restaurants. Their smiles are often transactions, their laughter is brief anesthetic, their eyes are rarely here. They stare into glowing rectangles, hoping to forget the hollowness between moments. We have become allergic to our own presence. But suffering does not forget. It waits. It is the only honest guest left at the table. You push it away, drown it in projects and partners and pills, but it lingers. Because it knows something you do not, that through it lies your only chance at seeing clearly. Do not misread this as cruelty. Suffering is not punishment. It is a mirror. It reflects the bankruptcy of your illusions. It forces you to drop what does not matter, because nothing else will. Only when you are stripped of the fantasy can you touch the real, which is rarely beautiful, but always pure. Yes, your desires lie to you. They whisper that the next thing will save you. But salvation is the oldest trick. It keeps you in motion, keeps you consuming, keeps you reaching just beyond your grasp. Meanwhile, time, your only real currency, is spent like loose change. Death is not waiting at the end. It is with you now, as a quiet witness. Every breath is alone. Every plan is a gamble against the unknown. And most of what you love will be lost before you are ready. Nothing you hold will remain in your grasp. So where then is rest? Not in the world's pleasures, not in perfect health, eternal youth, or endless choice. Rest comes when you see the will for what it is, a fever that never cools. A curse mistaken for compass. To renounce is not to reject the world, it is to stop being fooled by it, to look at the flower without needing to own it, to see beauty without craving its permanence. To love someone without asking them to complete you, to be here, not for what it might become, but for what it already is, transient, broken, sacred in its futility. This is not hope, this is not despair, it is the place beyond both. And here in this quiet devastation begins the possibility of peace. You were raised in the soft cradle of promises that things would make sense if you simply believed, that effort would yield meaning, that love would fill the absence, that knowledge would guard against confusion. But the further you walk, the more these promises rot in your hands. Their fragrance fades, the pulp is hollow. You try to make them last longer than they were ever meant to. You repaint the corpse, you call it passion, progress, potential. You lace your doubt with optimism, your exhaustion with caffeine, your loneliness with noise. And the illusion, like a threadbare coat, still offers warmth just enough to delay the cold realization that it was never designed to protect you from the storm. The mind seeks closure like a drowning man seeks air, but life is not a story. It does not resolve. It loops, drifts, forgets itself. You reach one summit and see another, higher and grayer. You touch what you thought you wanted, only to find your hand strangely empty. You love, and the love becomes fear. You win, and the triumph grows bitter. Everything is a rehearsal for an arrival that never comes. This is the tragedy, not of failure, but of success. The rare moments when you do receive what you crave and it changes nothing. You are still here, still inside this skull, still aching for escape. The hunger doesn't end. It merely changes costume. Modern culture has mastered distraction but forgotten depth. It offers you more data, more images, more connections, but never enough. You scroll until your thumbs ache. You consume until your senses dull, but the void yawns wider. It is not quantity you lack, it is substance. No app will save you, no brand will redeem you. The self you construct online is not a self, it is a performance, a mask taped to a mirror. You polish it, you protect it, you defend it against contradiction, but beneath it, nothing moves. The ego is an echo, in a canyon that thinks itself a voice. To wake from this is not an awakening in light, it is an unraveling in shadow. You begin to see that what you called identity was merely inertia. You begin to notice how much of your life has been avoidance of pain, of silence, of seeing yourself without narrative. Do not be afraid of this seeing. It is not darkness, it is the absence of false light. To feel lost is not to be lost. It is to sense, perhaps for the first time, that the map was always drawn in the wrong direction, that every route you trusted led away from yourself, that what you thought was home was merely a rest stop on a road to nowhere. All idols fail eventually. The lover becomes human, the dream job sours, the ideology fractures, the future disappoints. Even your concept of healing begins to smell of performance, another ladder to climb, another mask to wear. There is no salvation in self-improvement when the self itself is the prison. Let this understanding sink, not with panic, but with stillness. You are not here to conquer life, you are here to witness it. To sit with the ache, to breathe through the uncertainty, to watch the self dissolve like salt in water. And when the self dissolves, what remains? Only what was always there, the wind through the trees, the sound of footsteps on wet earth, the slight tremble in your chest. The sensation of being before you named it, before you owned it, before you tried to fix it. In this moment, stripped of striving, the world no longer resists you, nor do you resist it. You no longer ask it to be different. You no longer beg it for more. You are not free because you won. You are free because you stopped playing the game. To see clearly is not to feel pleasure, it is to feel peace. Peace is not happiness. Peace is the absence of illusion. Let the noise of the world pass by like a train you no longer wish to catch. Let the faces blur, let the slogans fade. You owe nothing to the machinery of momentum. You owe nothing to the scripts written for you in childhood. You are allowed to step out, to vanish from the performance. Not because you have given up, but because you have given in. Not to despair, to reality. Suffering is not the flaw in existence, it is the essence. Joy is the exception, a fleeting interruption in the slow, grinding agony of becoming. You are not broken for feeling this pain. You are merely awake enough to notice. Most keep their eyes half closed, not out of peace but fear. It is easier to pretend the wound is elsewhere, that suffering is a personal failure, rather than the hidden engine of the world. Everything you love is built upon decay. Every connection you forge is a silent agreement with loss. The more deeply you love, the closer you draw to mourning. That which dazzles you today will betray you by leaving, whether through distance, through change, or through death. It is not because life is cruel, it is because life does not care. Hope is a narcotic. It keeps the prisoner dreaming of escape while the chains tighten. The future is sold like a drug, each dose a promise of relief, of arrival, of ultimate satisfaction. But the future never arrives. It retreats as you advance, always just beyond the reach of your most desperate grasp. And in this constant movement, the present is discarded like a husk, something to survive, not to inhabit. You want to believe there is a reason, that your suffering serves some grand design, but sometimes pain has no script. It is not teaching you anything. It is simply what it is, the raw friction of consciousness pressed against the indifference of reality. The lessons you extract are often consolation prizes, awarded by the ego to preserve its belief in significance. There is no significance. There is only what happens. Even meaning is a kind of violence, an imposition upon the world. You do not extract meaning from life. You project it, like a film upon a blank wall. Remove the projector, and what remains is silence, repetition, stillness, the slow procession of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Life moves like a wheel, not a ladder. and every step forward is only another turn of the same circle. To detach is not to withdraw in bitterness. It is to see clearly that clinging to transience is the root of anguish. You can still walk among people, still speak, still act, but without illusion. Without asking the world to give you what it cannot. You love with open hands. You give without needing return. You exist not as a demand, but as a witness. The self is a tremor mistaken for permanence. It builds itself through mirrors, through approval, through repetition. But beneath every identity is the same trembling void, the unformed, the formless, the watcher who does not speak. You cannot find yourself because there is no self to find. Only the will blind, raging, relentless, clawing through flesh and thought, demanding, always demanding. You tire of this clawing, not because it ends, it does not, but because you finally see it for what it is. Not the source of vitality, but its great eroder. Will is the fire that consumes its own shelter. It gives life the appearance of direction while pulling it further into torment. Do not fear the fading of your passions. It is not death, it is sobriety. The cooling of desire is the first taste of peace. Most mistake it for depression, for defeat. But it is the beginning of release, the moment when you no longer run from your own emptiness. Emptiness is not your enemy. It is the only space in which truth can appear. You will lose everything. This is not a threat, it is a mercy. What you cling to now would only grow heavier with time. To lose is not to be punished. It is to be returned to stillness, to presence, to the part of you that does not beg. Do not rush to fill the silence. Let it grow. Let it become a vast sky above the ruins of what you once called self. In that sky, there is no judgment, only space, only breath. Only the soft, patient realization that you are not here to fix the world, only to stop mistaking it for something it is not. The lie was not in your failure. The lie was in the expectation. And now, in the gentle ruin of that expectation, the truth begins to shine cold, indifferent, and strangely kind. You were taught to chase wholeness, to fill the gaps in yourself with love, success, recognition. But the gaps were never meant to be filled. They are the shape of being itself. The hollow is not a flaw. It is the truth. All form emerges from absence, a bowl holds because it is empty. A heart longs because it was never meant to arrive. You suffer not because something is missing, but because you believe it shouldn't be. Even your noblest desires to be kind, to be wise, to be understood, are not exempt from the machinery of the will. They wear finer clothing, speak in softer tones, but the hunger remains. Every attempt to transcend yourself is still an attempt to escape. Even your thirst for enlightenment is a refusal to sit still in your own skin. You climb the spiritual mountain only to find your own footprints circling the base. Detachment is not a technique. It is not a strategy. It is the natural result of seeing the world as it is. When the masks drop of romance, of identity, of destiny, what remains is not a void but a quiet clarity. You no longer expect water from stone. You no longer beg the wind to stay. You walk through the world like a ghost who has already died and found, not horror, but relief. The will seeks to personalize suffering. It says, "Why me?" But suffering is not personal. It is the background hum of existence, the dull ache in all things. Even the sun must burn to shine. Even the river wears down its own bed. If you suffer, it is not because you failed, it is because you live. And to live is to be pierced, over and over, by the sharpness of impermanence. You grow weary of the chase. This is not weakness, this is vision. The endless cycle of anticipation and disappointment begins to shimmer, not with hope, but with transparency. You see through the game. The prize always vanishes when grasped. The lover becomes routine. The success becomes burden. The peace becomes boredom. It is not that the world withholds. It is that it has nothing lasting to give. And so you turn inward, not in narcissism, but in necessity. You trace the edge of your own mind, listening for what lies beneath the noise. The voice of the will begins to tremble. Its commands grow faint. You do not answer. You simply observe. The need to become someone is replaced by the grace of being no one. There is a certain beauty in the quieting of want, not the beauty of achievement, but the beauty of a flame extinguishing itself without regret. You feel yourself dissolving into the landscape, no longer a figure against the world, but part of its rhythm. You breathe with the wind. You ache with the stones. You are not above suffering. You are its echo. Every illusion you lose brings you closer to this stillness. The self crumbles, the roles collapse, the narratives unravel. You grieve, yes, because the fantasy was comforting. But beneath the grief, there is relief. The burden of pretending lifts. You are finally permitted to not know, to not strive, to not matter. And in this nothingness, there is a strange form of presence. Not the presence that performs, but the presence that simply is. Like a tree in winter, like the sea without ships. You are no longer waiting to begin. There is no beginning. There is only this flickering moment, full of ending and becoming, carrying you without destination. Those who have touched this place do not speak of joy, they speak of silence, of the absence of pressure, of being carried by something that does not explain itself. They no longer ask the world for meaning. They watch it pass like clouds across a black sky. They do not cling, they do not resist, they simply remain soft, alert, unafraid of vanishing. Because they have already vanished. What you take to be death is only a return to transparency. What you call surrender is the letting go of a grip that was never needed. The ego dies not with violence but with understanding. And what remains is not a person, but a presence unmarked, unnamed, undemanding. This is not transcendence. It is absorption, the self melting into the world it once opposed, the end of striving not by completion, but by disappearance. A candle burning itself into darkness, not with sadness, but with peace. Here, in this vanishing, nothing is solved, nothing is fixed, but nothing needs to be. Time loses its teeth when you no longer run from it. The clock, once a tyrant, becomes a quiet metronome, not counting down to something, simply counting. Marking the movement of forms as they rise and fall, each beat another grain of the self slipping into the ocean. You realize you are not in time, you are time. The decay you fear is not happening to you, it is what you are. A dissolving structure of sensation and thought, momentarily arranged, already crumbling. You try to hold on, even now, to some shred of permanence, perhaps to memory, to identity, to pain, but all of it moves. Even memory mutates. Even pain loses its original shape. What you cling to drags you. What you release allows you to float. The world is not solid. It is a mirage of shifting surfaces, pretending to be anchored. The body is soft, fallible, perishable. The mind is restless, always trying to escape itself. Even your emotions, which feel so vast in their moment, are ripples on the surface of a lake that forgets them. To grasp at these things is to clutch water. And yet, the illusion is seductive. The illusion says you are separate, that you can build a self apart from the world, fortress-like, immune to change. But there is no fortress. There is only wind, and what it touches. The harder you resist this, the more violently you suffer. The more gently you surrender, the more you disappear into the fabric of what is not as a hero, not as a victim, but as silence. Detachment is not apathy. It is the full participation in life without the lie of possession. You still feel. You still move through the world, but you do not need it to complete you. You do not demand it fulfill your story. The story has ended. Or rather, it never began. There was only movement, misinterpreted as narrative. There was only light, filtered through the mind, and mistaken for destiny. You do not need to be understood. Understanding is a trap, another form of control. To be understood is to be placed, and every placement is a limitation. Let yourself be vast, contradictory, unpinned. Let yourself vanish in the eyes of others. Their gaze cannot reach you where you are going. Pain remains, it always will, but you stop resisting it. You stop making it into an identity. It passes through you, like weather through a valley. You feel it, deeply, not as a message, but as a presence. Not to solve it, but to witness it. Even agony, when seen without commentary, softens, not in sensation but in weight. You no longer carry it. It simply arrives and leaves. Even love changes shape. It becomes less about fusion, more about openness, less about holding, more about seeing. You do not love to gain or to escape. You love because you are no longer afraid of dissolving. Love becomes the way you disappear into the other without losing your center. A momentary union, never promised, never repeated, sacred because it passes. Loss teaches you what nothing else can, that you own nothing, that you are entitled to nothing, that even your most sacred attachments are on loan, and the terms of the loan are never disclosed. When the time comes, they are taken, and you are left not with what you had, but with what it revealed in you, the capacity to let go, again and again. Simplicity returns, like a forgotten language. The sky needs no interpretation. The breath requires no meaning. You watch a bird fly, and do not ask what it symbolizes. You simply witness it a fact, unburdened by significance. In this gaze, things are no longer mirrors, they are themselves, and you are no longer a seeker, you are what is sought. There is no final insight, no sentence that resolves the mystery, only this, the realization that there is nothing to resolve. The questions dissolve not in answers, but in stillness. You do not arrive. You stop departing. And what remains is this empty fullness, this quiet hum beneath the noise, this presence that asks for nothing and gives everything. To live from this place is not heroic, it is not celebrated, it is barely noticed, but it is free. You begin to move more slowly, not out of fatigue but reverence. Every step becomes less a stride toward something, more a sinking into what is already here. The pace of the world no longer infects you. You watch it rush past, a blur of craving dressed as purpose, and feel no impulse to follow. The silence you carry is enough. It contains everything you thought you had to earn. Words begin to lose their power. They feel like nets cast into a sea that cannot be contained. The more you speak, the more you notice the distance between meaning and utterance. You find yourself drawn to silence not because you lack thoughts, but because you see the futility in naming what must be lived. Language fractures the whole into manageable illusions. You let the whole remain unspoken. The faces around you seem softer now, less defined by role, by ambition, by posture. You no longer ask what they want from you, or what you must give them. You simply see them temporary, yearning, confused, just like you. Their cruelty becomes comprehensible. Their masks, once threatening, now look like armor worn too long. Even their love, so often laced with need, feels forgivable. You see that no one escapes the trembling. When the idea of progress dies, a strange kind of spaciousness takes its place. You no longer measure yourself against an imagined future. You are not improving. You are not failing. You are simply continuing, like the wind that neither wins nor loses, but moves all the same. The arc of your life bends not toward achievement, but toward dissolution. And in that arc, there is no judgment. Sleep becomes sacred, not as a pause, but as a surrender. You no longer fight the day's end with noise or numbness. You lie down as if entering the underworld slowly, deliberately, with gratitude. You give yourself to the dark, not as an escape but as a return. The body, that weary animal, deserves this softness. It has carried so much without thanks. You begin to see that even your thoughts are not your own. They arrive unbidden, shaped by 1,000 forgotten voices, drift through your mind like dust in light. You no longer cling to them. You do not identify. You do not resist. They are not the truth. They are weather, and weather changes. Music pierces you in ways it never could before. Not because you understand it more deeply, but because you no longer need to. A single note held too long brings you to the edge of tears, not from sorrow, but from recognition. The sound speaks the language of your dissolution, a language without words, without ownership. It tells you what you are, resonance, fleeting, and sacred. You lose interest in defending yourself. Criticism no longer wounds, because there is no fixed image left to protect. Praise no longer elevates, because there is no pedestal beneath your feet. You become transparent, not because you lack substance, but because you no longer resist being seen through. There is freedom in being misunderstood, in allowing others to carry their own projections, uncorrected. You stop asking why. The question itself begins to feel misplaced, like a key with no door. Things happen, people leave, pain comes, joy flickers. There is no map, only terrain. The path is not revealed in advance. It is drawn by your walking, erased by your silence. Meaning does not precede experience, it follows it, like dust behind a carriage. You do not become indifferent. You become tender. But your tenderness is not weakness, it is unarmored strength. It is the courage to feel without possession. The courage to hold beauty and let it pass through you like a sigh. You weep not because you are broken, but because you are open. What once felt urgent now feels distant. The need to prove, to belong, to win these were ghosts of a self that could never rest. You no longer answer their call, you let the phone ring in the darkness. There is no need to explain your silence, it speaks for itself. The world becomes sharper in its outlines. You notice the sound of leaves beneath your feet, the way light bends through glass. The sigh of an old person crossing the street. These details, once drowned by your haste, now feel like revelations. You see them not as parts of something else, but as ends in themselves. Nothing is a stepping stone, everything is arrival. You carry your solitude like a lantern, not as a burden, but as a guide. In its glow, you are no longer afraid of the dark. You see that the dark was never empty. It was simply silent, waiting for your eyes to adjust, waiting for you to stop searching and start seeing. And still, the world turns. Seasons shift, people forget. The body ages, nothing pauses. But within you, a stillness deepens not from detachment, but from intimacy with all that passes. You are no longer the seeker. You are the silence that remains when the seeking ends. What you once called the end begins to soften, not into triumph, not into despair, but into a widening stillness that no longer measures itself against what might have been. There is no last moment of clarity, no final revelation. There is only a quiet watching, a slow exhalation of all that was once urgent. You no longer search for the self. You have buried it gently, like a worn-out garment, beneath the tree of what simply is. In its absence, there is a strange relief. You are no longer burdened by the need to be consistent. You change without resistance. You vanish without loss. You appear only when required, and even then, only lightly. There is no reward. That was another illusion that the truth would lead to something greater. But there is nothing greater than what is. The moment, unembellished, unpossessed, is already complete. It does not ask for transformation. It only asks to be seen, fully, before it vanishes. That is all life ever needed, not improvement, not redemption, but attention. Death walks beside you now, not as terror, but as companion. Not because you welcome it, but because you no longer pretend it is elsewhere. Its presence removes the last pretense. It shows you that everything you feared losing was never yours. It shows you that nothing held you but your own hands, and those hands, tired now, can finally open. You remember less, not because memory fades, but because it no longer clings. The past becomes a series of quiet rooms, dimly lit, visited only when the heart aches for a shape it can no longer hold. The future is a shore you will never walk. You stay here, in this dim flicker between not yet and no longer, the only place you are ever truly alive. There is peace, but not the peace you were taught to expect. Not the peace of resolution or safety. It is the peace of no longer needing anything to be different. The peace that comes when the storm inside no longer seeks shelter, but becomes the sky. And what remains? A gaze that does not grasp, a breath that does not reach, a soul that no longer begs for meaning, but moves through meaning like water through fingers touching, holding nothing. You walk with lighter steps. You sit without reason. You watch the world move as if through a window in a dream. You are in it, but not entangled. You feel it, but do not become it. The sorrow of things remains, but it is no longer yours to fix. It is the world's breath, and you are merely passing through. You loved, you lost, you longed, but these were only ripples. What remains is the ocean, silent, formless, deeper than all stories. You do not know where it ends. You do not need to. And so, you return. Not to a place, but to a way of being that needs no arrival. The candle burns low. The shadows stretch long. There is nothing left to say, and yet everything has been said. You sit with it. You let it be. And in the final silence, you disappear not in defeat, but in peace.